Hello, everyone.
Hi everyone.
Hello, Tiger.
Hi Gauri.
So today we were having Tiger as our co-host again, and but don't worry, you will see Kent in a moment. Uh, Tiger is one of our web developer in Shopee. So do we have our co-host? Is Mia here?
Co-host. Oh,
Yeah.
I think she's in the bedroom.
She will she will ponder over when she feels like it. Right. So, if you guys remember, a few weeks back, we talked about a Safari bug where HTML content and sticky status don't update very well together. So, since today we have Tiger again, let's talk about that. So, has there been? So back then, we were trying to reproduce the bug without the context of React, right? So after we chat last time, do you manage to reproduce the bug without React?
Oh yes, of course. So actually immediately after the sharing, Iching find me and said he managed to reproduce the bug. But I look at our code and I realized that there is actually a difference between inner HTML and inner text.
Oh, just
So
so the fact that previously we were not reproducing it is not relevant to React, but relevant to something else that
yeah,
you're talking about.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So please.
So the Okay, sorry. To recap, right? The bug is about updating the sticky elements position
Mhm.
on the same time when you update the content.
Mm.
But the way I update the content is not correct. The way the field I use is inner text. So that's why I didn't manage to get it to the bug to be reproduced. So if I switch to inner HTML, yeah, I can reproduce the bug. The root cause is that inner text actually considered the style. So if you use inner text, you will get a repaint, and hence
So,
it's repaint. Yeah, since it's repaint, then yeah, the text content actually got updated.
so we need to trigger repaint in order to reproduce the bug.
Yes,
And
exactly.
inner HTML and inner text has different behavior upon whether it will trigger repaint or not. Is
Yes.
it? Oh, okay, cool. So after we reproduce this thing with vanilla JavaScript and vanilla things, we've created a bug ticket for Safari, right? So
Yes, I created a bug in WebKit Bugzilla.
has there been any progress?
Yes, actually, can I share my screen?
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So can you see it?
Yes, I am seeing it right now.
Okay, so on the right, we have the bug ticket that I created.
Mhm.
Since the time I create the bug ticket, there is a developer, Safari developer, actually looking into this issue, and he managed to reproduce a even weirder bug, like even weirder screen that is on the left.
Oh,
Can
it
you see
looks.
the half one, half zero?
Yeah, I was about to say it looks like someone with a smiley face, but with only the nose, without eyes.
Yes. So for my example, you see
Mhm.
this is from the very top of the screen to the very bottom of the screen, right?
Mhm.
But his example is actually a half screen example. The sticky situation is not exactly changed, but it's only a offset shift, right? If you get the timing right, actually, like if you, let's say we refresh for a few times, you're able to get this.
Oh,
So you
uh,
see, actually, the repainted area is this area, the top where the element used to occupy before the offset is updated. This one. So the repaint offset is actually off. That's the root cause of this bug.
Wow. I wonder whether this issue has caused a lot of wrong things on the internet or not. Are we the
I'm
only
not.
ones?
I didn't manage to find any other bug reports regarding this sticky problem, because apparently this has something to do with a specific sticky layer offset.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So for this one in particular, is there any workaround for us?
Yes, the current workaround provided by Enough is that we update the position and then we trigger a repaint manually to make sure the final subtotal price is updated correctly.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, yeah. This is the first time I get so close to getting involved to browser bugs, and I'm personally very excited about this. I really hope this will get fixed in the near future, and it's also my first experience to learn about this process, so it was very interesting to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it very interesting as well.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Okay, so thanks for this sharing. I hope everyone here is getting ready for the last working hour of this week. And next, let's pass on to Ken, who will start our event for this week. Ken, are you here?
Hi. Hey.
Yes, we can see you properly now.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, are you able to see my screen? Okay, I think you guys can. Okay, so I'll just go with the assumption that you guys can. So welcome to Akira Original 71st. And I think we're still gonna have a couple of more of this like live streaming, as I think the Singapore PM just extended the how do I put it?
Circuit breaker.
Yeah, the circuit breaker. Yes. Extended the circuit breaker all the way to the 1st of June instead of the May 4th. So so you'll be enjoying us enjoying each other like through our videos until then. So some fun fact that we did some tests, some test streaming earlier this hour, and our test stream got banned. So it's we are not exactly sure why, but we are actually suspecting that because Tenzy was trying to practice on his ukulele and he played a really familiar theme, and I think the Google system picked that up and went ahead and banned us. So yeah, very interesting. So back to our event this week. Shout out again to Shopee for allowing this to happen and engineering for giving us the advice. Again, the COCs, please do not record our live streaming. You can find our live streaming in the link that we will share later on if you want to have a look at it. So do not post advertisement in the live chat and do not say mean things to each other. So if you would like to speak at RK, either poke at us, poke at myself or Kawei, or you can go to this link and you have the instructions there. Singapore CSS is happening on May 6th. I believe it's Wednesday. So yeah, so I think they're gonna have a live stream as well because I don't think any meetups can meet up as usual. So for today's topic, it's about Frööt Lööps. Is it a cereal or is it about something else? Maybe Tenzy will explain. So Tenzy, please.
Should I share my screen?
Yep. Please go ahead.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, I saw on the stream. Okay, it's up. Hi everyone, and today's topic is about Frööt Lööps, and basically it's just the namesake comes from this meme that brother, may I have some loops, and I thought it was very cute, and I was looking into something based on a tweet, but before that, let me first talk about myself, because some of you are new here. So I'm a front-end web engineer at Shopee. I am one of the few Singaporeans in the engineering team, and sometimes I do weird shit with CSS and JavaScript, sometimes literally over here. And these are all my socials and handles. So usually I go by TZYINC. So this is the tweet that kind of sparked my interest in this. Basically, it's a very, very controversial tweet. All code using array reduce should be rewritten without array reduce so that it's readable by humans. And he obviously milk thread because it's so controversial. In fact, he followed up with, okay, fair enough. There are cases where array.reduce is the best thing to use when you want to look really, really smart and don't care about readability. And as you can imagine, there is some backlash with this. And this backlash is worse than the time when he pissed off some politician supporters, apparently. So over here at Shopee, we also love to use reduce a lot. And I figured, why not talk about the intent behind these tweets and why he feels so strongly about using reduce. So another thing, following up this tweet, they actually had a podcast. So over here, there is Jake Akibald, and this is Soma. And they go into way more detail than I do on all the cases of how bad reduce is, and or rather reduce being used in the wrong way. And I think it's worth a watch. It's only 20 minutes, and the link is right there. But before I go into that, here are some of the things that we're going into loops. So here are some of the things that I found while researching into this topic. So interestingly, there are these two for loop cases. As you can see, the only difference right here is the length equals to test array.length, as opposed to finding the length value at every iteration. Now, of course, there's some functional difference between these two. One is that if the length changed over here, or if the length of the array changed over here, this length variable will not change. Whereas for this one, if the length of the array changes, this length, of course, because you're accessing it in every loop, it will change. And but in most scenarios, at least in modern browsers, both of this behave similarly. So if you ever find any advice about doing the first case over the second case due to some optimization, it only works on certain engine like Internet Explorer, which is known to be the best. And also, I believe Node.js still has this still doesn't have this optimization, so it will still be slightly faster. But this kind of speed is also, of course, quite negligible. Next, this is another weird thing that I found. People were actually promoting the use of this weird for loop as a optimization or writing for loop. So if we think about this weird code structure, right? Usually we'll add the increments at the end, but in this case we are just doing starting from a large number and then counting down. And because this value returns the I value after it's been subtracted, so we will what will end up happening, and therefore it will exit this loop. But if you really want to have this kind of weird optimization, just don't, because first of all, it takes some thought to figure out what's going on. And second is why not just use a while loop? Because this is exactly how we will write a while loop anyway. So next, this is another interesting thing that some of you may know, but object from entries and object entries is a very good way to change an array to an object or back. Some browsers don't support it, as you can see in the picture below. But this is actually very useful in a lot of our use cases where we are transforming data back and forth. And many of the times we want to have some key as an identifier for a quick lookup rather than searching for that thing in a find. So for next, we have sum and every. This is actually widely accepted. And I find that even though this exists, a lot of us who did JavaScript, picked up JavaScript by ourselves, we don't really, it never occurred to us to look up whether this exists or not. And most of the time we end up using filter, like in the first example. So we are filtering over two conditions, and then we check the length of this filtered array and we return that. Whereas it can be just as simple as using a sum, or if you want every case to fit a certain condition, then you just use a every instead. And this is actually modified from an actual example in our code base. So, and this, the engineer who is doing it is fairly senior, so you can kind of realize that sometimes it's not because we don't want to write better, it's that we don't know that the better example, the better way of doing it, or at least the more clear way of doing it already exists in some form. Right. So next, I'll talk a little bit about performance. I don't want to rush. I don't want to have such a huge focus on performance, because ultimately, and I think a lot of people will agree, is that in terms of at least in our front-end development, code readability is usually better than performance, more important than performance. Of course, there's a lot of different use cases where you might need to optimize performance. So I'll just touch on it a little bit. So over here, we have this is the kind of boilerplate to create an array, right? And then we will run some operation on it later. And here I have a few ways of running the same thing. First is our usual for loop. Another one is a for off loop. Then a map, and then for in loop. And then finally, the one where we actually look up we actually store the length first. And in these scenarios, it will be quite interesting because if we look at this sum operation, it looks like, a map would be the most fitting thing to use. It's actually the most obvious way of running this operation. For loop, while being quite readable, is a bit verbose. So most of us will just go into this map. But a very interesting thing is actually map is one of the worst performing thing that we can use for all of this. We can run the for off, which is not that great also. We use this quite a lot in our code base as a syntactic sugar, as well as for in. So it turns out that actually just using a normal for loop with the length stored is indeed faster. In this case, even though the looking up length is slower by a good margin, I found by running this test over and over again, sometimes the ratio is different, sometimes the winner is different. So it depends on really the browser. So we go into code readability and the whole point about this this presentation, like why is reduce bad? And most of these use cases are from reduce. So there are a few major reduce. There are a few major ways we use reduce, and the first most obvious one is summing things together. This is a very valid way of using reduce. In fact, it's a textbook example of using reduce, right? So at the top we have the reduce way of doing it, and at the bottom we have the for loop way of doing it. I think there's nothing much to say here. This feels quite obvious, easy to read. The next one is some form of collecting things together. In this case, so if we look at reduce, it still kind of makes sense. Concatenating a string from the current to the accumulator, and then it grows. We also sometimes use this strategy to combine arrays together and whatnot. Now this, I think, it is still within the bounds of readable, or at least all of these are readable. It just depends on how familiar you are with reduce. But at a quick glance, we know exactly what it does. It's a bit weird use of reduce, mainly because the accumulator here is actually being reinitialized, recreated over here, and then it passes on to the next one. It's not the same variable. It just creates a new one and then overwrites the previous one. Of course, when you're just combining strings together, you should just use array.join. There might be some use cases where array.join doesn't work. In that case, usually you would do some map and then you join after that. So next one is finding the largest item. This one is quite weird. Okay, so excuse the third example. This is a mistake, but these two are exactly the same. Math.max already accepts multiple instances of multiple parameters. So I'm not sure why most people will do array like this, or will do a reduce like this. Really, the only reason reduce is being used here is for its loop, and in that case, just write a for loop is faster if you want to do it that way. And then here we have creating object. So there are two ways that people tend to use reduce here. One is they actually start off with an empty object. Then after that, it adds a key, assign some value. It could be null, it could be something else, and then it returns the object. Again, this is overwriting the previous object over and over again. For this example, people actually spread the previous object and then they add a key. Interestingly, this is not only way harder to read than this, it is also twice as slow, because spreading the object takes on time, and then the reduce loop itself is on time. It's actually on squared. And if you really wanted to do this, and this is why I brought up the object from entries earlier, why don't you just use object? It seems more straightforward, at least to me, because when you're reading this, you read it sequentially from top to bottom. Whereas for this example, you need to first start at the initialized variable, and then the initialized accumulator, and then go into the callback. And both of these are functional. So there is really no reason, or not much reason, to use reduce over object from entries other than just to use reduce. Yeah. And then for the last example, of course, the fastest way and the probably the first way we learn to create objects is just using the normal for loop. And this is way more readable to beginners, and also it still has that sequential top-down flow when we are reading code. Now, that is most of the common cases. I'm not saying that if you do it the other way, if you do it the reduced way, it's a crime, or you should stop doing it immediately. What I'm saying is more along the lines of if you're writing a reduce, if you feel that reduce is the easiest way to read for you and you're the one maintaining it most often, maybe you should wrap it in a function, wrap the callback in a function, so it's more obvious what the reduce is actually doing, and it improves our readability. Or if this is a large code base with a lot of other people touching the same code, then perhaps you should avoid using reduce in this way. So next is actual examples from our code base. So this is actually, there won't be any top secret code or whatever from Shopee in this presentation, but it is but it is, I did modify all the variable names and check out the basic idea of what people are doing here. So let's look at this example. First, okay, so we have the accumulator, we have item group, and then we use the some ID, we convert it to string, and then, oh, this is just like collecting, right? This is using the ID as the key, and then the content as the value of a object. So in that case, object for entries, right? So this itself is just some filtering logic to check if some ID exists. So we just filter and map, and it seems so much more readable. The only thing is that maybe object from entries is not as commonly used. People may not know how it works upon looking. But if we use this more often in our code base, I think it will be actually more beneficial. It's also more maintainable in the long term. Then here is just a for loop implementation. It's not great, but it's not that bad. Again, really like to emphasize that reading this code is more sequential than the example above. So in the next one, here we have array of list.reduce. We start with a null accumulator, always assign that something is bad. And then we either return the accumulator, which is a null, or if some valid item, then we return the accumulator. Otherwise, we'll go into some list of find some condition. So we are just, essentially, this is a list of lists that is flattened, and then we just find the first example and return it. So this is actually way more readable if you think about it that way. You, at a glance, you know exactly what is going on. It flattens it, it finds it. Alternatively, if you don't like to use flat, because from my understanding, flat is fairly new, we can always use concat and spread out the array, and then we find on that some condition. This will also just flatten out. In fact, this, if I'm not wrong, this is a polyfill for flat. So next, over here we have, let's look at this. We are starting with an array, and then we have some items for each. We're passing the data, and then we are pushing it to the accumulator. So essentially, this is just flattening out array. It's an array of arrays with objects. So in that case, just use flat. Again, to the credit of whoever who wrote this, this is probably, flat probably didn't exist when this was written. So in this example, I would just extract out the callback and then write some meaningful name to the function. Over here, let's look at what this does. It is concatenating the value and index. So essentially, what this does is this map function, and then it is adding the index into the whatever it is, and then putting it back into the array. And in that case, just use the map and then just flatten it afterwards. So that's all the examples in our code base. And I'd like to reiterate that, you know, using reduce by itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. Most of the time, we just need to extract out the callback into a function and give it a better name. But I hope you all learned something. So these are the resources that got me into looking up this all the details. And I hope that we, you know, if we encounter any of this code in the future, we will refactor it. If we don't want to rewrite the reduce, at least we give it a more meaningful name and hopefully we will have a cleaner, easier to read code base. And of course, reading code is always very subjective. So if reduce is more readable to you, maybe do the rest of us who cannot read reduce a favor and have it extracted out into a different function. That's all for my talk. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Tenzy. Just to check if your VPN on. If it's on, maybe can off it.
No, my VPN is off.
Okay.
I off it during the trial.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think we realized that your audio is a bit choppy. But it might be because of the 3D background, the animated background. So I don't know.
Oh no!
Yeah. So we don't know whether that's true or not. Yeah. But we are accepting questions. So a question from Master Chen Chen. How do you feel about reactive JS? RxJS. Yes.
I actually don't know what that is. What is reactive JS?
RxJS?
I actually do not know what is RxJS.
Okay.
Let me look it up.
Chen, maybe you can give a quick explanation about RxJS.
RxJS.
Yeah, if I'm not wrong, it's some changes into how we do code. Yeah, I also have not exactly used it.
So the first thing that frightens me is asynchronous or callback based code. Callback based code is always a bit it's always going to be dependent on the naming of the callbacks. If you don't have good names, if you don't, or even not just a naming, right? If you don't organize the callbacks well enough, it ends up, you having to jump all over the place just to read code. And most of the times, most of us tend to read code sequentially. So on the bright side, you can probably split up your callbacks into manageable parts. And that seems to make sense, but in the end, it depends on how well we can enforce the coding standards.
Okay. What about what does Frööt Lööps mean? So I think at the end of the day, I think you still have to explain to us what does Frööt Lööps means.
So Frööt Lööps are this. They're not spelled like this. They're spelled with proper O and yeah, they're spelled with proper O's. Frööt Lööps are this cereal that one day there was this particular picture of a cat begging for some loops, Frööt Lööps, and I thought it would, and everyone, not just me, like it caught the whole world by storm. Everyone loved this image, and it became a meme. Brother, may I have some loops? And since I was looking into videos and just ended up having a little bit more information on other kind of loops, I decided why not just call it Frööt Lööps because that sounds cute.
Okay. Do you have any more questions?
The stream is really quiet today.
No, I think they are singing praises of you. Like all your fans are saying hi.
Oh really?
Yep.
Okay. That means my tablet is not updating the chat.
Yeah, I think you're enjoying the chat later on.
Okay, that's cool.
So a question from Li Hao. When you are searching for the usage of reduce in the code base, did you found any code written that you don't understand anymore?
There was so much. So actually, there were more I found that I couldn't understand than I could. I'm particularly bad at reading reduce. I know some people are a lot better. And there was a lot that I wasn't sure what it would do unless I knew what the array shape is like. And in that case, I would need to go into the flow type, and I was too lazy for that. So when picking up my examples over here for examples to simplify, I actually only found the things. I actually only used the things that I could understand without modifying any of the without finding out what's the flow type of the array in the first place. So I guess like for every three, I just search in our shared packages. For every three examples of for every three videos that I was looking into, I only got one example out of it. So 4 examples, that means I looked for like 12 different things or so.
And there's a question for Gaowei. Will you pass other people's MR if you see bad loops?
No, because I assume that they know better than me. After this this exercise of finding out what the reviews does, and in most cases, when I look at reviews, if I can't think of a better way to do it, I usually will pass it. But just practicing looking through our code base and then rewriting the reviews gives me some idea on what to do in the future. So in the future, if I see unnecessary reviews, you will bet that I will provide a alternate example, and then it's up to the person who wrote the code to decide which is more readable to them.
So I think that is all of the questions that we have today. We have more questions. I think for those that within a company knows how to look for tenzy, for those that are fans of tenzy, you know how to reach him. So
Yeah, it's over here.
thank you tenzy again. For sharing with us today about loops and the argument of using functional programming versus regular programming. All right. So I think this is all we have for today. Do you have anything else from Gaowei's side? If not, we are done.
Yay. Play Animal Crossing. Message me on MetaMost if you want to come to my island.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I think that's all for today. So I'll see you guys next week. Okay, bye.
Okay. Bye. Is the stream over?
Not sure yet. You confirm with Gaowei.